Hi Sam.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. How are you
How's
doing?
everybody doing?
How are you doing today?
Doing well. I'm doing well. Thanks for staying up late to chat with me. It's what, like 10:30 for you guys?
Yeah, it's around 10:30. How has your day been? Oh, it's getting started. I guess it's 9 in the morning, Sunday.
I mean, I have a young child, so I start early, right? But yeah, no, it's good. It's good. It's a holiday weekend here, but we've been off for 4 days.
Great, great. So I'll brief you about how I've planned this podcast. So that there will be no ambiguity of any sort. So for the first 15 minutes, we'll just have a candid conversation about maybe our basic backgrounds. And one thing I found very interesting about your profile, I'll come to that. And post that, I'll give a short brief about my podcast, why I started this, and what is so special about this podcast. And so once that is done for the 15 minutes, from there on, we'll move to the actual podcast. So wherein first we'll go to the Moonshots game. We'll take up a particular problem statement, and we'll pick a technology card, and we'll brainstorm radical solutions. And it would be great if you can, guide us through the process. Would love to get your inputs along the way. And for 30 minutes, we'll brainstorm solutions, and for the next 30 minutes, we'll build a business model on top of it. So
Great.
that's the plan for now. So let's get started. So hi Sam, Raghuram here. And we have Pooja Arti, we have Akhil Kurana, Abhishek Katalia, and Yashwant Suresh. So we are all from we are all three generations of the same tech-led, industry-led business school called Masters Union, where we are pursuing a PGP in technology and business management. And so I have around 2 years of experience working in an IoT-based startup as a lead R&D and a product owner. And Yashwant, you can take through, and everyone can take a turn.
Hey, hi, Sam. So I had close to a year's work experience. Earlier, I was a research head in a supply chain company, and then did my MBA from Masters Union. And I've now joined as a chief of staff in electric manufacturing company called Ether. Over to you, Pooja.
Hi, Sam. Just how Raghu mentioned, we are from three generations. I'm from the grandparents' generation. I'm from the first cohort of Masters Union. I'm a lawyer by education. Then I've run my own startups, and now I work with an agri-tech startup solving humanity's greatest challenges using tech and science.
Akhil?
Akhil, you can go ahead.
Hi, Sam. This is Akhil Khurana. So I am from a finance background, and I have work experience of around 4 years in financial consulting. And I'm currently pursuing my TBM course, and I'm from the second cohort of Masters Union. Abhishek.
Yeah. Hey, hi. My name is Abhishek. Software engineer by profession, developer otherwise. I did my software engineering and I worked at JPMC for 3 years. And then for a year, I also worked at one of the trade finance startup from Bari. Now I'm the youngest of all of them. So I'm pursuing my master's from PGV course right now. Very happy to be here.
Great. So I saw your LinkedIn profile. I got a little bit sense of your profile. You have around 13 years of experience. You have completed your PhD from University of Penn. You have co-founded, as well as worked in a couple of startups in the field of IoT, chemical and medical electronics. And currently you're part of the rapid evaluation team at X, right? But the one thing that I really found interesting was the fact that you pursued your BA in physics, BS in physics, as well as BA in saxophone, if I'm not wrong, within the same duration. And that was something that I found really interesting. So would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a really small town in Western Pennsylvania, in sort of the eastern part of the United States. And one of the things I did in high school that I was really, really involved in was the band. The marching band, the jazz band, you name it. I was in pretty much 8 different bands at any given
Wow.
time, including a couple of rock bands that we even recorded a CD at one point. But I was very torn when I graduated high school into what to go into, because I think starting my junior year, I was going to be a biochemist. And then I took a chemistry class and I thought, oh no, this is actually the science that will let me learn how everything works. And then my senior year, I took a physics class and I was like, oh no, forget about it. I'm going to go into physics. But then I also wanted to be a musician. So I only really applied to colleges that would let me do a joint program. So it was a lot of places where I was either auditioning for, a conservatory that had a really good music program and then hoping they had a good science program, or, vice versa, going to a really good science program, hoping they had a good music program. But ultimately, I went to Case Western because they had a relationship with the Cleveland Institute of Music, which is a conservatory, and a really good physics program. And so I basically just killed myself for 4 years. I took about 30 credit hours per
Wow.
semester
Okay.
to graduate in 4 years with both degrees, because they, as you might imagine, nothing overlapped, right? None of the prerequisites, none of the courses really overlapped. So yeah, and then when I graduated, I was, I still have all my saxophones. I have 4 of them upstairs. I'm in my basement right now, so I may refer
Okay.
to upstairs a lot. I still have 4 of them, and I just bought my 3-year-old daughter a little plastic one from Amazon, and so we kind of play together sometimes. But I don't keep up with it nearly as much as I'd like to. I
Okay.
sort of, went the physics route after undergrad.
Sure. Sounds great. So, can you take us through a little bit more on your role at X, and more about the rapid evaluation team and how it functions, and how is the culture at X different from all the startups you have worked, or maybe other companies you have worked, or what you have heard from people, maybe?
Sure. So I've been at X now a little over 3 years. I got recruited by X in fall of 2019, not for the rapid evaluation team, but actually for a project team that was ongoing at the time.
Okay.
And I sort of became the tech lead of that project. And I came in, I worked on that for probably the better part of 6 to 8 months until we decided it was time to kind of wind that project down. And that was also during the pandemic. So, I sort of joined in October of 2019. I was at the office for 2 months. Then my daughter was born, so I was out of the office for 2 months. And then I was back in the office for 3 weeks, and then we shut down for the pandemic. so then anyway, so my project shut down sort of that summer, and then I joined the rapid evaluation team after that. And then pretty much since then, I've either been on the rapid evaluation team proper, or sort of on a project that was taken out of the rapid evaluation team that I was kind of working on. The way X works, I mean, and you guys may know some of this from looking at our website or from things you've heard, or maybe talking to Olivia. But like basically our mandate is to come up with ideas that solve big problems using some sort of novel solution that in 10 years can basically be $100 billion business and help 1 billion people. So it's no big deal, right? But that's sort of our mandate for every idea that goes anywhere in the fact. And we call ourselves the factory, X, the Moonshot Factory. You'll see us referred to as Google X sometimes, and that's kind of how it started.
Right.
But we're very strongly now called X, the Moonshot Factory. But the team I work on, the rapid evaluation team, we're sort of the front line of that whole process. So we either come up with new ideas, come up with new project ideas, evaluate technologies that are external that we find from, a conference or a call with somebody, or reading scientific papers, or other people at the factory bring us ideas that they have, and we sort of go through a process of evaluating them. That process can go anywhere from, a literature search, just reading online and seeing what other people have done and getting a basis for it, to doing a real techno-economic analysis of it to see if it would even work out, if we could make something work. And this is actually probably the side I fall more towards, is once I've made an initial decision that, hey, there's something here, we go and we build stuff, right? We go and we build a prototype. We try to reproduce some of the results. We basically try to de-risk whatever we can, to a point where we're satisfied this is something that sort of meets our criteria for being a moonshot. And as you might imagine, if you imagine the startup world, that maybe 1 out of every 100 startups kind of succeed, right? The rest all kind of die. Well, with a startup, your bar is much lower. right? You sort of have to make money for your investors. You have to hit your milestones. You have to solve a problem. You have to have people like your product. And that's already really hard.
Yeah.
But with a Moonshot, we like to say that we have probably 10 ideas a month that could be great startups. And that's not to say I have 10 ideas a month, but I mean, across, the company, we probably have 10 ideas that could be very successful startups, but they just don't meet the criteria or pass muster for us to say, oh, that's going to be a Moonshot. And all the Moonshots we work on, I mean, theoretically, they could become a new division of Alphabet someday. Or they could spin out into a big company, or they could, be absorbed back into Google, or they could, there's a lot of different pathways for that. But the driving force is that we're really doing good in the world for 1 billion people, but also generating revenue that's really significant for a big company like Alphabet. And so on the record evaluation team, we kind of move really fast, but we also kind of move really, how to say it, we're very technically oriented, so we're very careful about everything we do, but we also try to do a lot of things so that we have a lot of shots on goal to make something work. So on any given day, and I'm sort of running 2 of my own projects and helping out with like 4 or 5 other projects.
Wow.
My day may start, answering emails and then going to the lab and doing some crazy experiment, and then going to the shop and building something, and then talking to a team of designers about this other thing I want to make, and then talking to a team of programmers about how to look at this data, and then, end up back at the end of the day where I'm like helping some other project with some piece of technology that I just happen to know how to do, that nobody on that team knew how to do. So it's a very like kind of crazy thing. And it's both simultaneously the most fun job I could ever imagine having, but also probably one of the hardest jobs you could imagine having. Because like the bar is high for anything we do. You have to be okay with a lot of failure. You're basically trying to figure out why things don't work, as opposed to trying to make things work. And you asked about the difference between that and a startup. That's probably the biggest difference. Once you start your startup, and you get your investors to fund you and get people behind you, you may pivot at some point, but, by and large, you're still trying as hard as you can to push something forward and make it work, because that's your whole company's livelihood. At X, it's the exact opposite, right? If you get too attached to something and you really just try to push, a square peg through a round hole for too long, you're doing the exact wrong thing. Like if we can't find a novel way to do something, if we can't find a way to sort of come at it so that we have an unfair advantage, then it's usually just not for us. Yeah. So I mean, I could go on and on, but that's I think a little bit of a highlight. Sure. And once a project is sort of ideated and de-risked within Rapid Eval, well, then we decide like, do we want to graduate it to the sort of next part of the factory, or do we want to like push it off somewhere else? Do we want to run it ourselves? Do we want to bring people to run it? And it's all again about giving it the best chance of success, but also the best chance of failure should you come up against something that just says, hey, this isn't going to work anymore.
True. And the one most, I would say, there was Project Loon, which I was very closely following up with, right? And now I think it has pivoted more towards Project Tara, if I'm not wrong. The base technology that was built from Project Loon is now being used in Project Tara. So,
well, they're actually, it's funny because those 2 projects actually ran simultaneously. Loon was shut down, for a number of reasons. So Tara's kind of still going, and there are pieces of overlap, but I think, by and large, they have a lot of the same mission. But they both found their sort of niche of like something crazy that they can do there that's different and kind of world changing. But yeah, they are definitely related.
That was the time when I felt how difficult would have been, for the people who are working at Loon to pull the cord after so many years, putting so much effort into building those technologies. So I'm a big fan of X. Now, coming to the point of my podcast, so how this all started was just based on our external CGPA, right? So as a component of our MBA program, we were supposed to do 3 things. One is to work on our own startup. Another is to consult a specific company or a startup, whatever it is. And third is to become a social media influencer. And we were all graded based on these things. So that's how I started getting into this. But I didn't want to, become a social media influencer in a different way in the entertainment field. I was more into the tech related stuff, right? And the UN Sustainable Development Goals are something that is close to my heart, which I want to, address each and every one of those points one day or the other. And while I was coming across all of those, I came across Moonshot's game from X's website, and that really intrigued me. So I felt, why not, just try to brainstorm radical solutions for these UN Sustainable Development Goals, problem related to these goals, and maybe, build a business model on top of it. What is stopping at the end of the day for an idea to get created into a business is a business model at the end of the day. So I felt, why not create a business model and publish it? So that's how the podcast, born. And now we have completed almost around 6 episodes, if I'm not wrong, and we've pivoted in different ways. But yeah, this is a very special episode for me because we are going to talk about problem that is very close to my heart, which is providing quality education for everyone. And so that's the Moonshots game. We're going to select that, and we'll start playing that. So let's
That's a great topic. It's also an incredibly hard problem to solve.
Yes. So let's get started then. So just give me a quick minute. Let me share my screen.
It's funny, I'll tell you, like this game is we do a modified version of this sometimes, even on our team when we're brainstorming, right? We may not play the game exactly as it is on the website, but we will make a big matrix and say, like, here's a bunch of problems, here's a bunch of technologies, what can we find that overlaps? And then we may try to generate 100 or 200 of them in 20, 30 minutes. And then if anything sparks an interest, we'll go off, and some of those have turned into projects, some of them don't, and we just keep it running tally of them.
How often do you play this game?
This game specifically, I've only played a couple of times when I first, heard about it, and then, the other day when I was, knew I was going to be doing this podcast with you. But I knew about it because this is basically the job we have a lot of
Sure.
time, right? So
Yeah.
so you could argue I play this game every day more than I.
Sure. So
But that does not necessarily mean I'm any better at it than any of you, I would say, either, right? Because the one thing I always tell people is, like, yeah, we have a lot of smart people at X, which is amazing, but there are smart people everywhere. It's all about, finding the right opportunity, the right curiosity, the right creativity, and then just like finding the right way to put it together. And that's a lot of what we focus on process at X as well. So yeah, anyway, sorry.
Sure. So let me select education here, and next 30 minutes. Cool. So here's our problem statement, which is standardized tests. So standardized tests have historically been used to measure student achievement and school performance. However, some critics argue that standardized tests are not a reliable measure of achievement, have not improved school performance, and are oftentimes discriminatory towards students from low-income or minority backgrounds. Cool. So again, there are a couple of moonshot principles that I really stick towards, and one among them is falling in love with the problem. And like I said, this is one of the hardest problems, right? So we have standardized tests. In India, we have things like CAT. We also have GRE for people who are planning to move abroad. And this specifically limits the students who are from a very minority background and who have the dream of pursuing their education from a very big university one day. So I would love to hear all of your points on this specific problem statement, and any particular case studies that you have come across. Would love to discuss that.
Sure. Yeah, like I said, it's a great problem to solve because, in my opinion, if you can crack education, you kind of solve a lot of downstream problems. Because if you think about a lot of the problems that we face in the world, a lot of them can really be tied back to like how you got started, right? Like, did you have the same educational opportunities as other people? Were you given the same tools to learn? Were you taught how to teach yourself things in the same way? And a lot of that can really level the playing field and really address a lot of other things later on. So yeah, I love the problem. I also think it's incredibly hard. One of the things we tend to steer away from at X when we solve, we don't really steer away from many technology areas or many problem spaces, but one of the things we try to stay away from because we know we can't make much impact are spaces where the only thing we could do is dump money into it, or where we're going to have to require some sort of government mandate to change or like legislation to happen because it's just too unpredictable, right? We can't like measure it. We can't quantify it. We can't get an unfair advantage there unless it was through money or lobbying or something. So we kind of steer away from that a lot. That doesn't mean that we can't do something in education. It just means that those are sort of headwinds we always try to keep in the back of our mind when we try to solve a problem like this.
Got it. So just one point that I remember is that the first part of it is to brainstorm solutions and come up with ideas if there were no constraints. If there were no constraints, how could this problem be tackled, maybe with any technology or any science fiction idea, whatever it is. So if there were no constraints, how could we solve this problem? Any opinions, Yashwant, Pooja?
I just wanted to also understand when we're talking about standardized tests, I think we'll have to go a little more ground than where we started off.
Okay.
I think what Sam mentioned on where you start from might result in where you land. So I think it also goes down to, especially I and all of us, because we have almost started the same generation in India. So the education level and all of that has remained quite common between us. I don't know, Sam, if you have had these issues where you studied, maybe you can also chime in. But what we have done, and which is now being done away with in most places in India, but we have had gradings and percentages right from I'd say when we were 4. From then have these standardized tests started. Again, when I say standardized test, I mean one for everybody, but then it also comes with layers of which city you belong to, what language you speak, what kind of facilities are there in the place that you're living in. So all those things, when we take into consideration, I think we can also solve this problem sort of K-12 wise on what segment do we start with, and then we move on the ladder and we reach to where Raghu had mentioned about. If you want to study in your dream college, I think that starts with where you start your school at the age of 4. So I would say we can start ground up so that the problem has more substance and we can solve for a bigger mass than just the choice of few.
Sure. One point that I have is that let's try to go to the root of the problem, right? Why do we have standardized tests in the first place? Because maybe we need some reference as to, what is the actual, some sort of reference as to whether a particular student is capable of, maybe he satisfies a set level of maybe some creative thinking or problem solving skills. Is it just to understand the capabilities of a student in terms of skills, or is there any other deeper, I would say, requirement into having a standard test to assess a particular student's candidature?
So I would just jump in with one thing. I don't know how this is handled in India, but I know in the United States, one of the issues but also one of the reasons they have a lot of standardized testing is it kind of determines how much funding at the state level and at the local level is handed out to each school based on how their students on average are performing on standardized testing. So it's used to kind of like level set, how various curriculums are working. And then, and so it's good in a sense because you can get a read of like, who's doing a better job, but it's bad in a sense because it makes, school districts want to put a lot of emphasis on standardized testing because they want that funding for the next year. So they may not be teaching you the best thing to help you succeed in life, but the best thing to do well on a standardized test so that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, personally, I have always been terrible on standardized tests. You give me a bubble sheet to fill in and it's over before it starts. But I mean, I do fairly well, but you know what I mean? Like, give me something where I can like scratch out a solution on a whiteboard and I'm much more happy. I think that's a lot of people, that it's not a measure of intelligence. It's a measure of performance within a given curriculum, I think. So I don't know. And actually, to another point that one of you said about how to start this process, I always start, most of the folks I work with, we always start before we jump into a solution. I think one of you said this, really understanding the problem and like, what is the thing we want to fix? What's the thing that's really hurting people? Because oftentimes, and I am as guilty of this as others, I will jump into getting really excited about a technology or a solution that I want to do. And then I have to like stop myself, like slam the brakes on and go back and say, well, hold on, is that really the thing I need to do? Right. And it's tough, but anyway, yes, I think all the things you guys said are very valid. Let's really understand what the problem we're coming at is. I may even start looking up some statistics on this kind of stuff usually to say like, okay, what are the standard tests that are out there? What are the standard scores that people are seeing? How have those changed over the last 20 years? What's the projection for how those are going to change? And then break that down maybe on like a country by country basis and try to level across like what's in each country. And then maybe I pick a country where I say, okay, well, the statistics on standardized testing look particularly interesting in this country. Let's double click into that and say like regionally in that country, how are they different? I mean, that's just one approach, but not necessarily the right one.
Okay, that's interesting. Abhishek, Akhil, Ashwant, do you guys have any points to add?
I wanted to, on the problem side, it says that, sometimes most of the time standardized tests, you use it to measure the achievements and, the in general caliber of the student. But it does not, like, yes, some people like Sam and me, we don't go really well on standardized tests. Like, I really hate them. But one of the reasons why, India, if you look at the landscape, okay, so it says that every 100 kilometer language changes, dialect changes, and, the cultural changes in India. So people, like, I face this problem myself. I come from a vernacular medium student. I'm a vernacular medium student. So till my 12th, K-12, category, I learned in everything in different languages, regional language. So when you go to standardized tests, it's obviously it's in English or something that everybody understands. For me to at that point, for me to understand all the concepts and all the terminologies, all the relations between both the languages and relate my knowledge from one language to other, that translation takes time. So obviously, it's very difficult for me at that point in time to, perform well in this test. And I am not able to give out the best of me in those sort of situation and contexts. So that's why I feel that, this is a real problem.
Got it.
So for me, I think I would say I can kind of relate with that. Who just started with the story of telling like how it starts with the grassroots, right? I've been a low achiever from my school days, okay? Until there was a stage where they could let me do practical things or something. People didn't even recognize me for who I was in my school days. And it adds up on, right? So every time a standards test is done, it evaluates what you've learned so far. It's not to tell you what you're capable in the future. So a standardized test is only always doing a postmodern work. It's what I felt because of again, coming to the point that the exposure that we've got is going to be varying. So like the stats that Abhishek mentioned about the change in language and dialect and everything. Given that India, at least English is used as a common language like many other countries for many of the standardized tests. And for me, I know my vocabulary is not as great as many others, whereas my logical reasoning or my creative abilities have been great. But so example, that's why I liked him with MU also when they try to do not just standardized tests, they try to bring in different variables of telling like, are you good with essay writing? Are you good with storytelling? Are you good with execution skills? So these are things that has to be there from the very early stages is what I feel, because what a scientist always does to me is that it demotivates me and not only just learn further to understand like where I'm even standing in the ladder. Everyone cannot be measured at the same way. Right? I've understood for later stages of my life telling like I need not be as good as others with studies. Skill sets and abilities vary. So I think the problem for my assumption or my experience has been to say that standardized test cannot be the way to evaluate or gauge a person's ability right from the early days. That is stopping a person's ability to think also back and even ahead. My career's decisions also bound to that is what I've realized.
Got it.
So adding on to that, there's just one thing. So apart from the test itself, I think the education, the way it is being provided, is also kind of changed because of not how you can learn these subjects properly, or maybe some different subjects in which you are maybe better. So let's say if it's just testing your verbal or mathematics ability, so a child can be better at a lot of things, but since these standardized tests force you to learn in a certain way.
Why don't we just talk about some of the points you guys raised? Like if we removed like any sort of constraint of like money or time or people or manpower, like what if we think back to, okay, let's assume we're not going to do away with standardized tests, right? For all the reasons we mentioned. Let's just say something crazy. What if we had like personalized, like in-person delivery of standardized tests? So nobody has to sit and read a test in a language they're not familiar with, but they could do it in the spoken word. Like what might or might not change if we did that? And have we hit on the main bias in the standardized tests that like makes them maybe not the best? Is it language? Is it comprehension of something within a language you're not familiar with? Is it sort of that constraint that's put on you whenever you're taking the test, or is it by and large something else? I don't know.
What I feel is that there are a lot many times while you work, it's based on instincts, right? You just feel that this is how it is. But in a standardized test, most likely it's just it tests your maybe arithmetic skills or your reading comprehension and all that. And what I feel is the actual skill per se is not entirely being put to test. So what if you come up with some sort of a game which there is an interesting thing, right? So recently I played this very old classic game called GTA Vice City, wherein you try to build your empire, right? And that's when I learned to understand to grow my business, right? So as soon as I got some sort of money, initially in my older days, I tend to just save money and not, build my empire. But then the later stage when I started playing, I started building empires as soon as I got money. Even if I had exact amount of money and I didn't have any headspace, I still tried to build. And at some point in stage, what happened was, from the rents I received was more than enough to again expand my empire in a different way. And that taught me business skills. That was the first time I was very much impressed with the kind of skills you can acquire in a very indirect way that you might not even know. So what if you put them through some sort of a test, some sort of a game, which assess your skills in a different way, and then gives you a score on this is this is how much creative thinking skills he has, or maybe I don't know, math skills he has, or whatever it is, based on how you answer a certain set of questions, or maybe how you approach a particular scenario. Because in business world, as per my understanding, there is no right or wrong decision, right? Every decision leads you to a different end outcome. So it's completely perspective driven. So maybe measuring these things is entirely subjective is what I feel, and putting them through some sort of a game would give you the ability to profile a particular candidate based on his approach, and maybe that will give these universities a head start on how they can maybe choose their best candidates on what they are exactly looking for.
Can I ask a question about that? Don't take this as a challenge, but it's the first thing that came to my mind when you were saying that. I don't know how standardized tests are delivered today. I think the last one I took was the GRE when I was going to grad school, and it was on computer. But I remember a lot of the ones I've taken in the past being paper-based. So the question I would ask is, if you did a test like you just described, how much would it cost to develop and how much would it cost to administer? And would the cost of doing that make it something that would like not be possible to give to the same number of students?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting thing, and the cost is of course the first thing that you should look at. But again, the question should be, it's not whether to have standardized tests or not, but the format essentially is the problem over here. So one thing that you said, like, gamify the whole thing, and instead of that, like, again, you do gamification and in the format in which the person takes the test, but essentially, the report that comes out, it's always on the scale, like whether you perform low on certain parameters and perform high on certain parameters. Instead of that, what about if you get a report in some sort of graph sort of thing that you lie somewhere here?
Exactly. I also was, Raghu, I think it's echoing from you. Yeah.
Yeah. So what if you can just, put up a graph or some sort of MBA, like just like personality reports, you have MBTI reports, right? So it just tells you then whether, you lie somewhere here. And to get into, let's say, for this particular program or something, they are looking for candidates who are, in particular strong in these regions and stuff. So this sort of personality, which is, great at and it's they have to be like, nobody takes the standards just to have fun or just to know things. So if you change the format and if you give people insights related to something about their personality or about their IQ, EQ or something, that people would just take it for or fun also. And that's what I think.
I think it's I don't know, quite the coincidence. I would say today afternoon I was talking to a bunch of people, and they, for the first time, I had heard about it. So Tata Administrative Services is a wing in India, and they do evaluations only through gamifications after a level. Where I got to know that these guys had also spoken to the people who designed the game. So the game might be in, say, example, only about 5 minutes. Okay, say there would be a bunch of ships that would be coming and going, and you would not know how much is the capacity of each ship. Your task is to keep loading the ship with packages, and every package is the same way, but the load conditions of every ship could vary. So it boils down to this riskability, his intuition, his thought process, and so they're literally capturing for around 10,000 data points in less than 2 minutes. So why I'm able to resonate with Raghuram's idea is also like maybe not on the later stages. I'm okay to consider this on a smaller level, very early on. Shouldn't be part of the education system from the very early days, telling that a person can have the liberty to those examples, to take an evaluation through writing, to reading, to playing a game. It can be multi-purpose or multi-way. And coming to the cost aspect, eventually we are all going to look at ways and means to optimize on human errors and things, right? So we should probably have a AI only write games that can also adapt towards how economy is changing, how world politics is changing, so that we are also building the next set of leaders as per what the world needs and not for what the world was yesteryear.
That's a really good point. The idea of having context in a game, right? Context of who you are. I don't know exactly how you might measure that. I mean, you can think of a couple different ways, but like, how do you, this is actually going in a great direction, right? Because like, how do you measure the context of a person's experiences coming into a game or a test to then shape the test to their set of experiences? I mean, to me, that's super interesting. I don't know about how we would do it exactly. Akhil, you had your hand up for a while there. What's up?
So I just wanted to talk about the cost aspect that you raised earlier. So I was just looking at the cost of a GTA. So GTA game right now in India costs around $24, I think. Somewhere around $24 if you purchase it. And if you look at it, I think the company is profitable, the company that is selling it in India. And if you look at it, I think a GMAT costs somewhere around much more than that. It's around 11,000 in India. So I think more than $100. So if you look at it, I think the cost angle, the angle that we're looking for, it can be done easily, because I think the market size that we're looking at, if we and keep this test as a mandate for all the courses that we are looking at, let's say that there are a number of courses and the market size will be much huge as compared to the people who are buying these GTA Vice City or GTA 5 gaming series. So I think that it can kind of cover up the costs of development eventually.
So the cost, adding on to your point, Akhil, I feel the cost of development decides how well you're going to sustain, right? Until the game gets developed and goes to the market, you should be able to sustain yourself. So the cost of development plays a major role, and post which the rate at which you're planning to sell or whatever it is comes to picture, right? So maybe that is again one more thing that we can try focusing on. But let's come back to the main goal, right? So the problem that we are again trying to solve is to eliminate a standard test, or is it to make it better to a different aspect? What do you guys think? Yeah, Yashwant.
Pooja had to say something. I'll let that. Okay, fine. My quick point here is like, I'm not going to ask to remove standard tests. It's going to create a lot of chaos. We should start. We still do not know if we need a standard test also. So make it adaptable and improve it or make it dynamic is the way to begin from this point. And where the world that we stand could be my thought process. I'm, as much as I've suffered from it, I'm not into scrapping it right away, because we have systems and systems jobs, the economy built on somewhere this strategy is just also.
Oh, I'm completely on the opposite spectrum here. If we are in it, I think it's a good idea to be more chaotic and think of a completely radical and different idea, so that we come up with something completely different and not just a 0 to 1. I think this deserves a complete a redoing of whatever we've been doing till now. I think if we are getting away with standard tests and everything we spoke about, the gamification side of it, I think that there's a way to do this without improving upon what we already have. We can reinvent the wheel, and ideally we should reinvent the wheel. That is what I feel. When we talk about what Yashwant, I think you brilliantly spoke about. Let's say I'm somebody who wants to study. Maybe I don't know what I want to study, but I know that I want to get into let's say policy making or economics or any of those. I think a more contextual test or a gamified test would be a better idea than me writing a GRE the same way you are writing a GRE to get into, let's say, to study climate change in Netherlands. I don't think so. That's one of the best ideas. So more contextual setting towards what we want or what we can do would require shaping what is already done till now.
I'm actually in line with
That's a
Pooja.
really good point, Pooja. But sorry, all right, go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying I'm completely in line with Pooja. And the point that I was trying to think of was, why do we think of standardized test just to get into a university, right? Let's think big. Why not have a particular standardized test for going into a specific skill. Let's say you want to become a pilot, right? Maybe you actually, I think there are a couple of things like these simulation based things wherein you do the simulation before you actually go into a pilot's seat, right? So similarly, maybe why don't we design some sort of a game for maybe I'm not able to think of a specific profession at this moment, but let's say a musician, right? You take up you go near, let's say, think of a game wherein you get a lot of instruments that you would like, and you just start picking a particular instrument and you just maybe select some particular keys of a note or whatever. I'm not able to think because I haven't been in that space, but you just start exploring that, and based on there might be some reference levels on this is what is expected if you want to become a musician, and maybe based on how you play that particular game in a way, or how you play that instrument inside the game, maybe I can give you a particular score, and maybe if we compare these two things, then maybe that will give me a rough idea whether if you are qualified to be a musician or not, instead of having maybe a different sort of a test. Not sure.
The other question I would add to all this is, if we're going to apply this to the educational system or the workforce, etc., how do those institutions have to change to adapt to a new form of testing or a new form of level setting, right? Because I imagine, and it's actually a good thing. Pooja, you alluded to, like, creating chaos and all that, which I think is absolutely the right angle here, that you would have to shake everything up if you're going to institute a new type of standardized testing. And you could go a step further. You could do performance reviews by this, or you could do, you name it, right? I mean, of course, I imagine, I could be wrong about this, but I imagine the pushback would be that people want to have more, flexibility in how they do these things at certain levels. But then the counter argument to that is that there is no flexibility at the standardized testing level for your early education. So I don't know.
If you think about it, this might be very useful for universities accepting people, because then you decrease the dropout rates also. If the person who comes into, let's say, a course or a trade or anything, knows well in advance what they're getting into, and that they are pretty fit to be there, I think that would be a good sign for the universities also. And then you are sort of, the sanctity of everything that you're doing is intact.
And then you have to figure out a way to come full circle. And, like, if you're really going to make this change, right? We talked a little bit about, like, standardized testing driving funding for things, right? You have to find a way to incentivize everybody in that whole chain in order to make this, like, so that everyone will adopt it, right? So then the question becomes, and we didn't touch on this yet, but, like, what's the technology that's missing? Or maybe it's not a technology. What's the thing that's missing to make this possible? And why don't we do it today?
For my understanding, it's lack of data points. Right? So, example, the data point that we have is all about everyone's math and English communication skills, right? So, our ability to not gauge or take inputs about his artistic skills, or for a person, whatever might be the 8 set of parameters that may be needed to be an amazing musician. If we need to start capturing a lot of data points from the very early days for a child, from childhood, would it be a good repository to work upon it? I'm just thinking out loud.
Sort of a personalized context storage.
Yeah.
Database.
So my thought was like, so we move from childhood, from personalized context to things. So when we grow up for the university stages and all, we talk about context based on economy and for a world forum. So from moving from very personalized to from micro to macro, are we stitching data points together? And could it be a good way? I'm not sure.
Oh, oops. Nonetheless, let's still continue playing. I think we are having a good episode, so let's continue with that. Let's forget this for a minute.
I'll just add in here just that, like, there are very few brainstorms I'm ever involved in that, like, you set a certain amount of time you're going to have to brainstorm, and that you actually finish in that amount of time and come out with something. Usually, at least the way we brainstorm at work, usually the brainstorm will spark an idea for the next brainstorm, for the next brainstorm, for the next brainstorm, and then people will go off and kind of do their own thing and come back and say, well, that brainstorm really made me think about this. Totally different than what we actually started on. But it's a good way to come to something, right?
True. Yeah. But I think for an idea per se, the end goal, correct me if I'm wrong, but the end goal or the solution here is to develop a particular game for maybe a profession, or maybe to test different skills of a particular candidate, to examine his skills and take him up into a university maybe, and have a reference score. So the challenge would be to get to that reference point, is what I feel. So what do you guys think?
I think you have something. At the top of my mind, I was just thinking that Sam just asked, why isn't it being done right now? So I was just thinking that there's this perception that these tests have to be very serious. It has to be in a serious environment, and it has to be those, you need to fill out these on the paper, and you need to give it, and it has to be all quiet and everything. And somewhere I really love Raghuram's idea of a game. And just think that if I tell you that you need to play a game to enter a college, it's kind of you start to question a few things. And I think perception will be changing. The perception will also be a very big factor here, because playing a game to enter a college, it somehow it changes your whole thought process of how you have been raised so far. So I think that is also a reason why this is not coming to picture till now. And the second part would be one thing that I was thinking, that right now we are currently testing based on a particular factors, that we need to test on these 2-3 things, and that's how the test is being made. But now through this game, what we can do is that the test after the game, we'll know the n number of factors that will come into play in which the child is good at. So through that, there are any number of things that will be displayed in the report, that the child is, maybe if he's not good at mathematics, but the creativity is really great in those in the child. So these types of things will be different in this game. That's how we can change the whole thing.
You might even want to say, let's start this from like a data-driven approach and say like, okay, how much data is out there on standardized test scores, but also like how much longitudinal data exists, right? Because you'd have to really define your benchmark, right? But and it's also really hard to take a longitudinal study over a first flight because the study takes so long to do. But like, how do you define success, right? Is success in this case, well, this person did really well in their college studies. Could we have predicted that based on their standardized test scores up to now? And if not, then you all immediately have a reason to say, okay, we have to change standardized testing because it's not even predictive at all based on the data. Or do you even go farther and say like, okay, do my standardized test scores have anything to do with my, my happiness, my job performance, my overall income, my incarceration, all these things that people look at in studies. I mean, I know a few studies out there where they've gone like 50 years long on like early childhood into adulthood, but they're on like, sort of fixed populations of people. And they're fascinating because they can basically predict like, oh, this person was probably going to go to jail, and they did. Or, that sort of thing. But again, they're all biased towards very specific populations because it's hard to do that study on. So all of that is to say, I might start, or if I was going to do this as a project at work, I would probably start by trying to say, what's the biggest data set I can get hold of that's going to have standardized testing scores in it, as well as contextual data about the people, and then start to see if there's anything from that where we can start to see some sort of correlation that we could build off of to say, okay, well, if we change this, then you could start playing with the different variables and design your game around the variables that seem to matter the most, or something like that.
Yeah. So maybe why don't we take people who are specialized in a specific area of expertise, and maybe get a set of people, maybe thousands or 10,000s of people, and see maybe what remains, maybe which is constant among all of them, some patterns, recognize some sort of patterns, and maybe set that as the reference level to become specialized in a particular area of expertise. Maybe that would give us the edge. Yeah, Yashwant.
Brilliant point. So we're talking about this sector where there is the demand, like what is going to be demanded to be in this particular position. For example, what if another kid now wants to be staffed from X to Y years? So what would it take? What are the skills? So in this site, so now we're actually missing out. I try to take the bigger picture, as I was telling. We need to look at the full circle. The full circle here, we're talking about jobs, people, economy, and everything. So I'm not sure if this is important variable. Parenting and the parents play a huge role in every child's growth. I came across my cousin is just joining kindergarten, and there I saw my cousins were evaluated for their ability to teach the kid ABC skill sets to adapt in the school. So when you're beginning it, I feel that you should start at the supply. Supply is basically our parents got to also support you and give you the wisdom and knowledge to grow at a particular ladder. So while you spoke about this requirement set, we should also start looking at how there should be games for the parents to take and play. For example, are you fit enough? Are you, as example, a businessman could always have a bias towards teaching his son towards money and a few other skill sets. I'm just trying to see that, are we missing out an important variable? That pillar is also to be considered by gamification. There should be games for parents also.
Sure.
And you could go back even farther and say, like, is the real problem, if we really want to level the playing field, say, like, we've talked a lot about standardized testing because that was in the prompt, I think, but if we really wanted to level the educational playing field, like, I think you just hit on something really important there. You have to go back to that early childhood interaction. And that's an even harder thing to quantify than, context later in life, because up until a certain age, kids aren't going to tell you, like, they're not going to tell you many things about their context, right? So there is a group out of University of the West Indies, I believe, in Jamaica. It's in Jamaica for sure. I just can't remember if it's University of the West Indies. It's called Project Reach Up. That's trying to do this right now. Actually, they're trying to teach through games how to have parents interact with kids more and in a better way to help drive the kid to be better in adulthood. And there was a study out of Australia. You guys know about the Dunedin experiment that did this exact same thing. They followed people of this very small population for 50 years and correlated things in their early childhood to later on. So it's a thing that a few people in the world are thinking about. It was incredibly hard, I think.
Yeah.
But great point. Sorry, I'm talking a lot, guys. I don't know if you wanted me to talk a lot or not talk a lot, but I feel like I've been talking a lot.
So let's try to wind off this part of this episode with the next 2 minutes. And the next part of the episode will be building the business model canvas, right? So maybe if you guys have any concluding thoughts, we'll conclude with that.
I think my concluding thought is that all of us except Sam, we're coming from an experience where I think all of us wanted to be, let's say, astronauts when we were 6. And then we ended up, because our parents wanted most of us to be engineers, we became engineers. So
that's true for most of us. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a very contextual thing for us, Sam. I don't know if you know about this, but then most of Indian parents want their kids to either be engineers, lawyers, or doctors. Lawyers maybe the lowest stuff of them. But then most of us do end up getting into those because our peers are doing similar things. So the problem is much deeper than what we're discussing right now. I think it also depends upon how developed your country is, what languages do we speak. So because of India being so diverse, everything that we spoke about will need to be sort of standardized across languages, across locations, across income parities, because that is also a big thing in India. So we will have to contextualize to the smallest levels here when we talk about non-standardized tests. And for a country which is as diverse as ours, that is a big problem that needs to be solved, but I have no clue on how we can do it. So maybe in the next 30 minutes, if we can figure it out, I think we are in for something big.
Sure. Abhishek, any points? Any concluding thoughts?
Yeah. So earlier I was all thinking about, why we standardize. It's needed. Standardized tests are needed, but the format is essentially the problem. So as Sam mentioned, right, we need to somehow, level the playing field for everyone, So as I was thinking backward, why exactly we need standardized tests? Because at the end, it's all about data, how you've grown up, how you've done things in your life, in your professional career as well as personal career. And that dictates what kind of decision will you take if you're put in a situation where you have, study the data or something related to work or any sort of situation where you have to take essentially the decision. So I totally totally resonate with the point where we need to go equal, and it's not the only way. So standardized tests are not the only way. So if something, because at the end it's all personalized. Imagine a situation where you have one person going to each and every student and just listening to their stories and skills and stuff and just evaluating them and then telling them, this guy is good, this guy is good at this. It's essentially that. So I really think that we need to leverage the data.
Sure. Sounds good. Ashwant?
No, I'll just try to recollect what I had as thought only. So for me, I think if we had to go about, first of all, this is the part where I find this interesting. Raghu asked us to be radical for the first 45 minutes, and then he's asking us to build a business, which has to be talking about MVP and then practicality and everything. So this is a good pivoting point. But yeah, so for me, if I have to put it into thoughts and structure, data points are going to be important. We do not have enough data points to structure this example if that's business out of this. And say example, if we need to move out of standardized test and we need to build a new format, I think that the format of delivery and the medium is going to be the one that has to be varied. So yeah, it's going to be a hard software driven company. So I think data points are going to be important. We need to start iterating on collecting data points, putting them into formats and medium, and then taking it to delivery.
Sure. Akhil?
Just starting out to Yashwant, I think the other part that is how it results, the new test that we are bringing in or whatever new format we are bringing in, how it will be used by schools and universities. We need to see about that, how the stakeholders will be affected by it and how these stakeholders can use the data in a better way.
True. Makes sense. Sam, final concluding thoughts?
Honestly, I think that we did a really good job getting into the problem, but I also think we've only scratched the surface.
True,
right?
that's true.
Because I think I would like to break this down even more and say like for instance, right? Is it really standardized testing we need to change, or is it really like college admissions? Is it really job interviews that we need to change? And then we need to back solve what's going to give us the information to get to there. Maybe not. Is it the delivery method? Meaning, is it like the media of paper versus computer versus etc., or is it even just are you taking this test at home, or are you going to a testing center to take it? Because I can imagine that affecting people. What language is the test being taken in? What experiences has that person had in their life up to that point, which is going to drive them to react differently to that test? I think all that, each one of those are unique directions to go with this problem, and probably find even to kind of latch onto, or maybe even the problem is bigger than that. Maybe it's not just a problem of standardized tests. Maybe it's a problem of access to education. Maybe it's leveling education. I don't know. I'm sort of rambling, but also I think this is a good point in the brainstorm where we've generated a lot of cues and ideas. And now,
quantity of ideas and not the quality of ideas. That's right.
Yeah, to start. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So then let's get started with the business model canvas. Is my screen visible? Cool. All right. So let's start off with the customer segments, right? Who will be our target audience, or the different segments that we might target? The psychographical and the behavioral segments. Do we target the colleges who will, or the universities who will bring about this change, or do we target the companies who will hire the students who graduate out of this university, or do we target the parents to whom we have to bring about the behavioral shift? Oh, yeah, I think Pooja has already mentioned parents. So, or is it all three?
Most likely to pay the most for this, right?
Sorry?
Parents are probably the most likely to pay the most for this sort of a service.
Right.
If you're thinking strictly in terms of how do I make the most money and get the most customers, right? Unless you could validate that something about this test was going to give you drastically better employees, or you know what I mean? Quantify the amount of money that paying for this equals in revenue they're going to make.
Yeah, so what is the end result of pursuing an education? At the end of the day, it's about you understanding the subject and getting an employment where you can showcase your abilities which you learned in your university, right? That is the point of an education. So my point being, we should target both parents as well as these companies, right? So these companies have to first, I would say, recognize us as one of the best mediums to evaluate a particular student's skills, whether he is capable of performing in the job that is required. What do you guys suggest?
Um, as much as it's important to work around the employee segment, I feel it's getting crowded nowadays, right? Every 10th person whom I'm talking to about a tech startup, he says that I'll bring in customized evaluation metrics to push him for a particular role, for a particular software job, everything. If we have to be a company and if we have to go into a new and niche segment, why not start with parents? I've at least heard about, until unless Sam mentioned about few projects in elsewhere, few other countries. Very little have heard about how tech can also begin with training and helping the parents to be better versions of themselves, because the parents has themselves been a byproduct of earlier education. So I'm not sure how that's going to be a proper.
That's a great idea, actually. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
My take would be, if we have to quickly vote out and put priority, my priority is going to be about parents. Least priority would be for employees, because it's getting a crowded market. If I have to do a promotion strategy.
Sure. Your thoughts, Sam?
I agree. I mean, I agree with the idea that, like I said, Corey, I mean, parents will pay the most for this, and parents will want this the most, and parents will. I mean, like somebody mentioned earlier that I think it was Pooja, that your parents all wanted you to be doctors or engineers or lawyers. So, I think the downside to this, if we're looking at this not from the making money piece, but of the like impact piece, is you will see probably a lot of parents paying for entrance exams and like tests that will help to get entrance exams into the colleges that will get their kid to do the job they want them to do. But, by and large, if we're now talking about making money from the business versus the impact of the tool, then I think that's probably the right way to go.
Or maybe what if you design the game which will help you attend that standardized test, right? Let those standardized tests be there, but you instead of helping them learn everything to different medium of textbooks or whatever, what if you make them play a game and make them understand those concepts, and that will make sure that exercise levels the field, and then everyone takes the tests. Would that
my question, are we complementing or are we supplementing these tests? That's if you're talking about...
Initially we were talking about supplementing. I'm just raising a point. What if we can complement it?
Then it becomes those I don't know what the test is called, but then the INTJ test, the personality test that we talk about, it will become a good to have. How will you end? I mean, I think it will just be a little tougher to enforce if there's already something which has been there for so long and you're just adding one layer to it. I'm not sure how that will work.
Okay.
It shouldn't become a vanity thing rather than something which is taken very seriously.
Cool. Fair point. All right, maybe I think we are digressing it a lot. So let's just stick on to what we had planned. So coming back one sec. Yeah.
Can I just inject something that just came to mind that's it's a little bit radical, but not that radical, actually. What if the end product ended up being like a game you played with your parents, right? If you're talking about kids, so now you're not only involving the parent from a marketing perspective, but you're involving some of the context of like how learning has happened up to that point in the household, and it becomes a thing where like now you're not trying to convince your parents later on, well, no, I'd be best suited to go into this, profession, but actually here's data to show it. Parents feel happy about it. It's kind of a crazy thought.
Well, it's a radical thought, but yeah, I think it's pretty good. Any other points that you guys want to add on to that? What Sam's point?
No, I find it perfect, because earlier we were talking about evaluating kids and then evaluating parents. Now, if it's going to be the same ecosystem of evaluation, it only ups the game.
So I was just coming to the customer segment point. And we're talking about parents and we're talking about students. If you're talking about gamifying and replacing the standardized test, I think it needs to be a more continuous process than one test and be done with it. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking at a continuous testing, I think schools become a big also become a customer segment here, because they will be the one also teaching you everything else. And if you complement this thing into the teaching schedule and curriculum, I think it'll be more easily adoptable. Just my point of view, so that apart from parents, we also have a touch point in teachers who become sort of ambassadors and who help us spread the idea of non-standardized tests and the idea of doing maybe evaluation after certain levels and after let's say a year or two, or every 2 semesters or something like that. Maybe it'll just help us evaluate and get more data points into understanding the students better.
Akhil? Yeah.
Yeah, true. I was just saying I totally agree that it has to be a long-term test, because it needs to start from the school, right from school, and it needs to continue it to the future, because you'll get to know, and obviously when we are talking about data, we'll have much more data points if we have a similar platform. And talking about schools as a customer segments, I think, isn't it better that if we have them as partners, the schools and the universities, if we have them as partners, because we can give them appropriate data that, if the child is being, is going through the same test, and the results are being used to, to help them choose the subjects or something like that, then the results will also be better. And hence, these schools and universities can be partners rather than customers. And the more partners we have, the better, the more number of students will, or the parents will buy this course, and the more money it will make.
Sure, fair point. Abhishek?
Oh yeah, I saw that. I just wanted to tell you there's this very interesting thing that we were doing a couple of I think weeks back. So we were designing a co-playing games for one of the bands as a part of our population. So the concept was similar over there also. Like your main the player or student is the main person you are creating the game for. But every now and then it requires interjections from, let's say, a parent or teacher or something for him to move forward in the game. So this sort of similar model I can see, somewhere fitting off here in this situation or solution that we are trying to design. So I think it's a good model and it's continuous as well.
So what you mean is the schools and the teachers will become key partners, right?
Yes. Yeah, schools, teachers, and I think in that model, even parents are key partners, because your main player is someone else, and you're just everybody else is just co-player. So you require their interjections every now and then for you to move forward in the game, but it's not absolutely required, absolutely necessary for them. They don't get blocked. So that was the model that we were working on.
Got it. Yeah, Ashwant.
Just a quick point for my understanding of how this can go is that teachers could be key partners, but schools and universities are channels is what I presume, because that's the entry way for you to go to reach out to parents, because when a kid comes to the very first phase to the school is when you can capture these parents. Randomly you go to parents, they're not going to be these bothered, is what my assumption was. But yeah, we can debate it when we go further.
There can be one of those channels, right? Maybe one channel through which you get to these kids, maybe through schools or universities. Maybe the other option would be even be able to directly, like maybe what Byju's is doing. Okay, I think we both are on the same track. So yeah, cool. Yeah, Sam.
I was going to ask the question of, like, let's say that we develop this test. Let's say we do sort of a beta, and it looks like, parents, some schools or whatnot are going to, be into this. It's unclear to me what the method of making this the new standard would be, right? Is that going to be like a mandate that has to be passed down by some large number of school districts across, like, a given region of a given country? Is that going to have to be sort of a federal mandate across multiple countries? I guess what I'm saying is, it may be, to someone's point from earlier, to make this less of a nice to have and more of a have to have kind of thing. It's unclear to me how we make that switchover point, because it's going to end up becoming, I don't know, you guys probably don't take the SAT or the ACT. Do you guys take that still? I don't even know if anybody takes those as much anymore as they used to, but I remember that like people would have tutors and whatnot. And so that was a real nice to have. And it's a big business, but it's not a thing that's required. So if you're a company trying to make a thing that's going to supplement like that or be additive to, it's unclear to me. And maybe this is like the subject of like a first experimental thing that would have to be done, is to get to the heart of like, how would you go about making it a mandate that these things had to be true? Because then it becomes obvious, okay, well, it's a mandate. We're the ones providing it. Here's how we would do it.
Oh, okay, so right set.
Yeah, government would have to be a partner, I think. I don't know for sure, but I think.
Yep. Cool. So let's focus on the key activities. So what will be developing first? Let's say we have to build an MVP and we have to get to the users first. What is the kind of MVP that we'll be trying to develop?
It's a thought here, but like, if I track this to how we handle a lot of things at work, or how I in my day-to-day try to do this, like I would approach this more as let's go really big first and see what's the data we can ingest that we can start like making a model off of that would actually prove that any of our key assertions are correct, right? And so step one, what data is available? Do we have to pay for that data? Do we not pay for that data? How do we get to that data? What's in that data? Once you have that, you can say, okay, here's a correlation I found, a novel correlation within that data that says, this or that point or this or that standardized test kind of thing, correlates to this success later on. And then you could take that and say, okay, now where do I want to test that? Is it going to be on this one piece of parenting? Is it going to be on this one, piece of whatever? And then you could design sort of experimental MVP around that. It's kind of how I'd approach this, I think, because if you instead say, okay, I'm going to go, make a game that could be used as a standardized test replacement, you get into that zone. If we're thinking about this as, a moonshot, you get into that zone of, well, this would be a really good product. And we'd probably sell that, and we might even make, $10 million, $100 million off of it. But now we're missing that opportunity for the rest of the world, theoretically, or right, the rest of the billion people that might use this. So I would just argue that jumping to a, product we could push out quickly is useful because we'll get data from it, but only if it has that kind of back end of, what data is it based around.
So, so the key activity maybe would be to record data.
Record data or just try to find data. Because if you have to go about making your own data set here, you're going to find yourself in a 8, 10, 12, 24-month loop of like data collection, which in and of itself is going to be expensive to do.
True.
But there's probably a lot of this data probably exists somewhere. I don't know for sure, but I would imagine.
Sure. Okay, so
so data ingestion, maybe data ingestion would be the first thing to do.
So this is more like training the model or finding similar patterns, if I'm not wrong.
Looking for a new pattern, maybe, or because like if you just, there are certain things I think people will take as true, like kind of obvious true. Like if you practice certain things more, you're going to be better at it, right? People may take that as true, but people may not take for true that if you practice this thing at this time of day, over this many hours for this many years versus, what I mean? If you could show something like that, like let's use a real world example. I want to be the best tuba player in the world, right? If you found the well-accepted best tuba players in the world and you're able to show from their background that, okay, they practice for an hour at 5 a.m., an hour at noon, an hour at 5 p.m. And, they're way better than the people who practice all day long. I mean, it's a silly example, but like you're looking for something like that that's like a novel thing that you can then build into the thing that we're going to build here. And then you've really got then you've got something.
Yes. Yeah, good point. So first, we get the data that we need to work with, create benchmarks.
Or maybe just even create the question you want to ask, right? Whenever you have data, it's easy to say like, okay, I'm gonna look for the best or the worst kind of things, right? But it might be easier to say like, or forget easier. It might lead you somewhere better to instead say like, what's the question I want to ask of this data that I'm going to take and look at, right? And if you ask, the more specific you ask, the better ultimately a generic model based on data is going to be. And by the way, I'm saying all this not as an expert in like data science or machine learning or anything, but I work with a bunch of people who are experts in this field. So I'm just repeating back to you guys the kind of things they say to me often whenever I start talking about problems like this. But it is true actually, right? That like the more specific a question you can ask of a large data set, the better, your initial foray into it's going to be. And then you then start looking for, things that correlate to the benchmarks you're interested in.
Okay.
That sort of thing. But you're right that you do have to at some point decide what is your benchmark that this thing is supposed to make you better at. I don't know the answer to that.
I think also a little bit movement from machine to human needs to happen because you need a team of behavioral scientists who can the data which has come. You need to be able to understand it on a more human level because you're talking about people after this. Just data points and machine learning, I don't think it will solve the problems that we are going to solve here because it's very person specific. So it has to have more, bring back the psychologists and sociologists and make them create these for us or at least give us a direction on where the tech needs to go.
Got it.
An adjunct point to that, which is that was a very good point, Pooja, but an adjunct point to that is that if you're going to get into the realm of like data about, minors, data about kids, basically, or even just data about adults, right? You're going to get into this realm of having hold of personally identifiable information. And at that point, you're going to have, people in the room who know how to code that data so that you're not actually in possession of people's personal data.
Yeah, fair point to think. Cool. So then once we create benchmarks, what would be the final activity? Would it be towards building an MVP or would there be any other step before that?
A model to give us directions, and then those directions could be tested as MVP.
Sorry, Ashwant.
We need to benchmarks are where we need to go, right? But how do we go about for that? We need to articulate and test on that, and then executing those would be MVP if I'm not wrong.
Okay. Abhishek, you have any points?
No, I'm just thinking whether MVP is the correct next step because we have identified the key activities, but then slightly lost over here. Like, is MVP exactly the next step?
Okay.
So exactly, MVP is not the next. So example, now we have data points of where to begin with, and then, for example, we have benchmarks of where we need to be. So in between, we need to define the process of how to get there. So it has to be the process and way of achieving this, right? And for that only, we'll evaluate the parameters, right? So then again, it will be back-edited, and based on these steps, we'll design a game. So the outputs of these steps would be the inputs of the game to be designed as logics.
Yeah, it's mostly writing the outputs and then creating an MVP.
Yeah, so that's where we are creating the benchmarks, right? So once we analyze all the data, once we create questions, based on those questions, once we analyze all the data and get patterns, we set benchmarks on maybe this is the general pattern that is found. And once we find these benchmarks, isn't the next step to build the MVP actually or maybe let's forget the game, right? But maybe some sort of an approach to test whether the reference or the benchmarks that we have achieved is the actual benchmark to actually find whether or a train and test data set is what I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, right.
I would add another step in there maybe that even comes like at the same time as data ingestion or any of this is I would actually try to find 100 or 200 people to talk to about this problem, whether they're school administrators or whether they're parents or whether they're, But I would actually test the initial key assumption that there is a problem to solve here. Like I would challenge that, like internally, right? Like I think we all agree there's a problem, and it's all kind of personal for us because we've all taken standardized tests and we know people that are, that are sorted incorrectly, for lack of a better term, based on standardized testing. But I think that like asking questions to get a more detailed like pinpoint on this problem of like a large set of people. We do this a lot actually. We always try to like reach out to the real world as soon as possible because sometimes you think you have a big problem, but you find very quickly it's not actually that big of a problem once you talk to a number of people. I'm not saying that's the case with this problem, but I would add that as like, yeah, as like a next step is like real on the ground research with a bunch of people. Find the pain points. Maybe there are pain points we don't know exist yet.
Yeah, right. Adding on to your point, I think we need to talk to all the stakeholders, be it the schools, be it the students, be it the parents, to understand. Because if we are reinventing the wheel, I think there are a lot of problems that schools also might be facing with respect to these standardized tests. So it's better to talk to all of them.
And one thing that we do a lot that I think a lot of people do is they just call it different things. But like one thing to think about when you're laying all of this out is we tend to set like a kill criteria for a given project at as early in the phase as possible. So like we may say, okay, after the market research and identifying pain points, if we don't see this percentage of people saying this is a problem or, something like that, then at that point we would say, okay, well, we haven't met our criteria. So this is a no-go, right? Same thing after like taking in the data. Well, if you can't get a big enough data set, if the data is not fine-grained enough, if the data is not longitudinal enough, you might say, okay, well, that data doesn't exist. Now I would have to go take it myself. So that may be another decision point where you say, okay, at this point, I'm going to kind of stop doing it and focus towards something else.
Yeah.
Again, this is maybe the difference between, sort of moonshot thinking versus startup thinking, right? A startup, like everything we're doing here, like this may be, you may just power through all of those, get to a point, say, okay, now I just got to go work at it after to get my first customer, right? But I would add that into your thinking here is like, where are my stop points and what are they? How do I quantify them? It's kind of often the hardest thing to do, but like the best in the end.
The key resources would be in terms of conducting the market research and obtaining the data, right? So we need some in the field people on field to do the research and subject matter experts. Yeah, let's term them as data collectors. Fair point. So we have data collectors and we have maybe subject matter experts.
I think it's going to be all the stakeholders, right? You're going to want to talk to, so yeah, subject matter experts, which in turn are the stakeholders of this problem space, right? And one that we might want to add as a stakeholder that I think we may not have mentioned before are somebody from the companies that administer the tests that are given today. Because you never know, there may be problems on their side that they want to solve that they just don't know how to, that could end up being a big customer for something like this, right?
Cool. Makes sense. And in this case, what would be our key proposition?
I'm going in a little more marketing zone, but then identifying potential and harnessing them could be a key proposition that we're going after.
Sam, any thoughts?
I mean, I think I go back to the key proposition should be related to the problem statement, right? And if the problem statement is that standardized testing causes inequity, right, then our key proposition is to remove inequity of education at every level and then I don't know what the next part of that statement is, but something like that, right?
What would be, or how often will we be interacting with the customers? So maybe every grade that the student is passing, maybe should we get in touch with him, or maybe in that sense every year, would that be a right time?
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
I think you may have to also define that as you go into building this, right? Because if you really are going to turn the whole testing thing on its head, right? Right now we standardize tests once a year or et cetera, but maybe you find through some of your early research that actually the ideal thing to do would be every month or every quarter or something like that. But, who knows? But every year is probably a good starting point until you find otherwise.
Cool. And the channels would be through universities and maybe online platforms. Would that work?
When we mean universities, what do you mean by universities? Are we talking schools?
Yes. So right from school, so it's a continuous process, right? So right from schools to the universities is what I was thinking, something on those lines.
And just a context, I think when we say school, we mean K-12, and when we mean university, it means graduation and post-graduation. Because I know that you, in the US, you also call every college a school. We have different nomenclatures here.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Although I'm on board with you because I sort of talk about it the same way you just described it as you talked about it.
Cool. So
And we do start our standardized testing here at about the same time as you guys said you do. I think maybe at 5 or 6 we start it usually.
yeah, Yashwant,
We can just probably genetically name it as educational institution. So it would cover.
and Abhishek, you mentioned government platforms.
Yeah, so at certain point we were also thinking that government is also going to be a key partner and making this process mandatory or something that it's not some set in stone, but it's some sort of protocol that government has to inculcate. So if government is coming into picture, it rather becomes a channel through which we are implementing the whole program.
Right.
Yeah, so that's why I said government platform.
Got it. Do you guys agree with that? All right, let's quickly move through. Cool. Okay, let me just keep the key proposition as identifying potentials through engaging in-game activities. Maybe just a random thought. The cost structure would be for the entire game. Would that be a good way to start? Or maybe a subscription way every year they have to take?
I think that's good. That's in my opinion, that's very tricky to have an idea about at this point, right? That's gonna require more understanding of stuff. In fact, a lot of these I think are gonna require more understanding of the initial piece. But that's just my take.
Cool.
I think both of these revenue stream and cost structure, I think it's very difficult to find both of them right now.
Okay, I think that's fair. And I think we've extended this time by a lot. Thank you, Sam,
It's
for
super
actually
interesting either way, guys. It's super interesting. You may see this seems very foreign to me, this piece of it actually, because just thinking about how we tend to think about a problem, we will often dwell on the problem for much longer, right? Like we may not touch the business model or the technology solution or we'll get to a radical solution relatively quickly. But we tend to, because oftentimes we'll stop working on a project if we realize that the problem isn't really there very early on. So we go into that. And then, very quickly, once you've got all of that figured out, you do have to get to this, and we do. But if you notice that this seems a little more foreign to me than what we were doing before, that's probably why I did. But I think it's interesting to note that back when I was, working on startups and whatnot, this is very similar to what I would do. Just that I'm very out of practice with this sort of thing now because I've been working at Expert for years. And I get so into let's really understand the problem and then, what's our unfair advantage and this and this and this. But yeah,
So
this has been super fun, guys.
yeah, I think it's a good key takeaway for me also, right? So maybe I should focus more on getting more into the problem statement and understanding it better. Maybe I think that will also help pivot this podcast series. So, but thank you so much.
You may go through 10 or 20 iterations of what the real big problem statement is
Right.
before you actually latch onto one that you believe. And then when you start telling it to other people, you're going to start, refining it even more until you figure out oh no, this is the big problem, right?
Yeah.
And then you can start saying how am I going to solve it?
Sure.
etc. But yeah,
That makes a lot of sense. So, anyways, thank you so much, Sam, for being a part of this. I know it got extended by a lot, but thank you so much for your patience and giving us time on a Sunday. Thank you so much. Would love to again maybe have you back on the podcast sometime soon, if you feel
Sure.
to short join, or maybe even
Happy
others from X also who would like to participate in the podcast. So, anyways, thank you so much, and thank you so much, others, Akhil, Abhishek, Ashwant, and Pooja, for having so much patience and participating in this. So I think that's the end of this series of podcast of episode 7. Thank you so much, folks, for watching this podcast. Yes, Ashwant.
Sam, what was your take? What was your experience like? For me, for us, it was all entirely. We would love to hear your experience. Raghu has been passionate about this. We heard X through Raghu only. So your take on how this podcast is happening, your quick 2 cents.
Yeah, I think this is really cool. It makes me really happy to see that people are thinking the way that we do, right? Because I think that there's a lot of big problems in the world. People are not going to solve them all, right? So people should get out there and think about it. I think it's a good framing for how to do it. I think the game is a great way to start. Let me think about this. One thing I might say is you might add a round before that where you start saying, okay, let's think about a problem space and then get into a big problem, right? And even unconstrain yourself more. And then instead of kind of funneling down like this, you might say, okay, I'm going to be completely unconstrained, problem spaces, look for a big problem. And then jump to one and constrain yourself a little bit and then brainstorm on that. I think that usually that ends up being more productive for me whenever I do it. But and that would be something you may add as a thing that would be fun. I think there's a lot of fun though. I'm happy to have met you all, and I'm glad you invited me to come along for this today.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sam. That really means a lot. All right. So I think with this, any closing thoughts, Ashwant, Pooja, Abhishek, and Akhil?
This was absolutely refreshing. Even though it's 12:50, I think we're all pumped up. We still want to work more on this. Maybe later on, at that ungodly hours, maybe we can reconnect and talk about this more. But this is really interesting. I think this is a lot of potential, and looking at how people are energetic and the way they've been talking about it, I think it's a good space to start if we decide to.
Yeah, so I think Yashwant, that's where I'm coming to. But yeah, Abhishek, Akhil, and Yashwant, if you guys have any final closing points.
I'm just very happy to be here because we are right now in that phase in current program. We are brainstorming every day as to what are the problems that we can solve. And I can say by now, I've become I don't come from pharma sector, but we have researched so much on pharma sector now that I feel this is I can do this already now. Thank you, Robert, for inviting us. Really glad.
For me, I think I've been getting into a performance, and now I was getting into routine jobs and things. It was coming out back into my college days, which was just not very far away, but still the ideation session and the perspectives. As much as Sam, we were all trying to go away from the problem statements. I think you doing it on a regular basis helped us also understand that how many notes do we know away from the actual cause and then get back to it. I think the nudge was important, and that also helps us understand how much would it need for us to put a structure towards approaching this. Thanks for the thoughts. Thank you, Raghu.
Same for me. I think it's been long since we have brainstormed something together. I think we can remember me, Raghu and Yashwant used to brainstorm a lot when we used to be in college. So thank you so much, Sam and Raghu. And I think one key takeaway that I'm taking away from this is the kill switch that you mentioned. I think that is one thing that will always stay in my mind. I'll use it every time when I'm thinking about or brainstorming something. So thank you so much, Sam. Thank you so much, Raghu. Thank you for this.
So thank you guys. Let's end with a great picture. So it would be great if you guys can pose for the pic.
Can you stop screen sharing?
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Give it out to the world already.
I'll reveal my sort of Superman
Oh, yeah.
logo.
Sure. One sec. All right. Say cheese. All right. Thank you so much for participating. It's been great hosting you guys. Let's meet in the next episode. Thank you for watching this episode. To the ones who has watched till the end, please do like, comment, share, and subscribe if you like this episode. Thank you. All right.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, guys, take care. Bye.
Bye.